Good morning, everyone. Happy Rotary Thursday. It's great to see everybody here this morning. So we got an almost full house on this side, or at least fuller than it's been in the past year. So that's great to see. And then we have some folks joining us on the Zoom side. Good morning, everyone. So, wow, it got quiet in here real quick. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And Mark is going to lead us in the invocation this morning and the pledge. If Mark's not... Do we have a pitch hitter for Mark for the invocation, or Ron? I think Ron said he's always got one in the pocket. Ron, would you mind off the cuff coming up here and leading us in invocation, please? Or Ron can do it from that.
Please bow your heads. Our gracious God, we thank you for culmination of this pandemic that has affected so many so adversely. We thank you for the camaraderie and friendship and support of all of our friends in this club. We ask your continued support and assistance as we serve others. We say this in Christ's name. Amen.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Could y'all hear Ron on the second mic? We're testing out the second mic again. I just want to make sure you can hear it. Okay, thumbs up. I see a thumbs up. All right. We'll move over to guests and visiting Rotarians. Of course, we have our guest speaker, Waymond Burke, here today, and he'll be leading our presentation in just a couple of minutes. I think on this side, I'm seeing just family, Rotary family, so it's great to see. We love our visitors too. Do we have any visitors or visiting Rotarians on the Zoom side? Okay. If not, we'll keep going. Is everybody awake on the Zoom side? Can I hear somebody on the Zoom side? All right. Some announcements and brags. I have some club business, but I don't have any announcements or brags for today. So who'd like to share something good that's happened over the past week or two? I saw Dustin getting up. I thought he was going to share something, but no. I'm sure something good has been happening. Cynthia's got something, so if you don't mind.
I just recently bought a house. So we are in the process of moving, which I'm terrified because we have 30 years of junk in the attic. Yes, it's in Madison.
Congratulations, Cynthia. Okay, so Cynthia's staying in Madison, but it's going to have some fun cleaning up her house where she's been in for 30 years. Any other announcements, brags that we want to share before we get started?
Hey, Peter, Corey.
Hey, yes.
I got engaged over the weekend.
Yay. Congratulations. Woohoo.
Yay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I missed that. What?
We got engaged.
Oh, engaged. Oh. I think the mic glitched out over here. Engaged. Congratulations. Awesome news.
Thank you.
Okay. That's a big... Okay, there's food distribution. Farmers to Families will continue this Monday, 9 a.m. So if you have some time Monday, 9 a.m. and you want to help with food distribution, it's at the stadium. Come Madison Stadium, the school stadium. So come on by. I know Rotarians and Mark has been very instrumental for the club, helping out with that. Okay. Any other announcements? Oh, we got Bill Drake. If Dennis wants to hand him the mic. And Bill, if you just speak into the mic.
We got 2 months left for the Rotary year. If you haven't gotten your donations into the foundation, now's the time to start thinking about getting it done.
All right. So 2 months left in the Rotary year. So the foundation, I don't mean to repeat everything people say. I know you're hearing it, but I was in RLI, and I'm not going to keep beating this horse, but they talked about the foundation. One thing I didn't realize is non-Rotarians contribute to the Rotary Foundation a lot because of the rating that we get every year. It's one of those organizations and that that do great with the money, that really put the money towards good use. I didn't realize a lot of non-Rotarians also contribute to the Rotary Foundation, just because we get that 100% rating, I think, year over year. So thank you, Bill. We'll move our club business just to keep the ball rolling. If you have anything you want to add, please add it. So K-Tech assistant. So every year we lead the integrity or ethics portion of the K-Tech training. They have 4 or 5 students going through the K-Tech program right now. Of course, if you're not aware of K-Tech, it's Kids to Love. It's a Kids to Love program. They help foster children who aged out of the programs find jobs and things like that. So we lead the part on ethics, and we go over our 4-way test. And somebody had a conflict, so Bill is looking for one more person, one volunteer. It's a lot of fun. If you haven't done it already, it's from 1 to 3 p.m. Next Tuesday. Just let Bill know you're interested. There's no prep work. He has 3 or 4 people already, but if you're able to do it on next Tuesday, 1 to 3, they have slides, and you just go over the slides. And again, the class is just 4 or 5 people. So just let Bill know that you can help next Tuesday if you're available. Please. Employee of the Year is going through. Debbie Overcash is leading our Madison Employee of the Year, City Employee of the Year. So that'll happen on, I don't have the date, May 10th. Right now, it's looking like it's just going to be maybe Chris and I, just because I think they're still working out the social distancing and stuff, but that she's still talking to the city. So right now, at least Chris and I will be presenting Employee of the Year at the City Council on May 10th. And lastly, on business, the butterfly habitat, I think we had planned to do some stuff this Saturday. They're predicting rain, so that's been moved to Sunday. So if you're going to help with the butterfly habitat Sunday, Sunday 1 to 3 p.m. at Dublin Park. And if you're not going to help dig the holes and do things like that, and you just want to drop off pollinator plants, you can do that as well, and you can just drop those off to Bailey. So I'll send an email about that. Drop pollinator plants. If you can't help, Bailey's looking for pollinator plants. So I'll send that in an email, maybe all of those, just so you have it. All right, Fred, if you just pull up my slides real quick. We have a great speaker today, and I want to give him plenty of time. All right. So we have Dr. Waymond Burke, who prefers I just call him Waymond. And so he'll be leading our presentation, not just this week, but next week. So whatever he doesn't get to this week, he might be able to finish up next week. So lucky for us. A lot of you maybe haven't seen what this looks like, but this is the Rotary Pavilion, and the Zoom side won't be able to see that. But that's what we'll be sponsoring when we provide them $50,000. So this pavilion, somewhere on it will have the Rotary Shield or the Rotary Wheel, and we're just deciding where that's going to be. But that's kind of the sketch for the city, if you can see that. It's a big park, and that's where we're going to have our Rotary signage. So thank you for the club for everything we've done to get to this part. That's our signature project for this year. It was supposed to be a couple years ago. So just giving everybody an update. There's only one birthday on the docket today, and Dr. Ed Nichols gets the full recognition today. I don't know if he's on the Zoom side. I know he's busy doing great work for our school. So happy birthday, Dr. Nichols, on the 28th. And then again, today is the good, the bad, and the ugly of Alabama politics. And next week is ideological labels in politics. Again, Dr. Waymond Burke. So, and then Sunset Club meeting after that. That's all I had on my side, and we might have a minute or two if there's any other announcements. But again, I want to give Dr. Burke plenty of time, so I'm going to ask Mark to come up here and introduce our guest speaker. Sure. For attendance purposes, can somebody tell me who 0405 is on the phone number? Is that you, Brenda? Okay, we'll get that in a little bit. All right.
All right, I am relatively prepared for this versus the invocation. I knew this was coming. It's a pleasure for me to introduce Waymond Burke. He is here for part one of a double booking, different topics. That is, unless we just don't like him today. So we'll see. You've had a chance to read his bio. He is an educator and a student of politics. He's taught history and political science at Calhoun full-time since 1990 and part-time since 81. Prior to that, he was at Butler High School for 16 years. At Calhoun, he's project director and founder of the Center for Southern Political Culture. He's also two-term president of the Calhoun Faculty Senate, actively involved in the community, serving on and chairing a number of boards. He's a member of the Huntsville Downtown Rotary Club. So this serves as a makeup, I'm sure. You may have heard him on radio. He's a frequent guest on local programs and is a guest columnist and resource for AL.com. He and his wife, Jan, are natives of Huntsville and Madison County, and they own the One Mule Land Company, LLC, a family-owned real estate entity. Waymond describes himself as a poor, simple, mild-mannered country school teacher. So he's become a friend, and I'd like to welcome him to the club.
Thank you so much for having me here today. He asked me, could I actually be here at 7 o'clock in the morning? And I said, the Decatur Daybreak Club has you beat. They're at 6 in the morning. And I drove from Big Cove over on the other side of Huntsville there one morning. So you complete my Rotary tour of Huntsville, Greater Huntsville, Madison County, and so forth. I'm now spoken, I think, to all the groups. It's a pleasure to be here. I really love what Rotary does. I've been a member since 07 of the Huntsville Club, and I know we all have our unique projects, and I really like that pavilion. That really looks great. One of my former students is here, Carla, over here, and I appreciate that he's not mentally scarred or anything, so that is good. And I saw Senator Bill Holtzclaw's name up there, so Senator, thank you for joining us today. I hope you're well. And like I said, I commend you. I will try to dazzle you rather than baffle you, but that is possible. But I must tell you, I turn off my cell phone, but if it does buzz, there's some wonderful people trying to help me with my car warranty, and I probably need to catch that. Okay, I have my free quote on history. And that jumped off the page at me when I was 13 or 14, and I was reading this book. And of course, our generation is going to know who Ian Fleming was. But I think it's so true that history is moving pretty quickly these days, and the heroes and villains keep on changing parts. Ask Bill Cosby or the coach at Penn State or whatever. If you live long enough, you can destroy your own reputation. And then some people who vilified actually regain favorability for whatever reason. Well, this thing is, whew. Yeah, anyway, I call this Alabama politics, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm a native son, as I said, and my wife is a native daughter. And we love Alabama. I chose to stay here as a younger person, and our son lives in California, and we don't like that very much as an only child. And so I hope he'll move back here one day. But we have plenty to be proud of, but unfortunately, we have some things not to be so proud of. And I'm going to talk about some of these figures in the past. And sir, if you'll warn me about the drop dead time about 5 minutes out, real fast. And next week, I have a little bit more time. I'll tell you about our archive and collecting political propaganda and so forth. Our reputation is very important. And this is a letter written to Oscar Underwood, who is a U.S. Senator, the first elected U.S. Senator from Alabama. We only elected senators since 1914 because of the 17th Amendment. And he was a giant of his day. He would have been a Mitch McConnell or Chuck Schumer of his day because he was a Democratic leader in the U.S. Senate. And someone from New York has written him, he said, and he's replying, he says, I received your letter of the 23rd intact today, in which you state that a statue has been erected in Troy, Alabama to John Wilkes Booth. I have never heard of any such statue and do not believe that it exists. And of course, that's our reputation, but things there actually was one. It was not a public statue, but some guy had a tombstone carved with that. You know, I'm from the old slide machine days when you had the, and they had them your day, right? I didn't give it up until the bulb burned out in the machine and the school wouldn't buy me another bulb, so I had to learn PowerPoint. So anyway, that's okay. We worked through the bugs. Okay, good deal. H.L. Mencken, who was a very famous newspaper guy back in the day, when he spoke of Southerners, he said that we were subatomic politicos, and he described the South as a sewer of imbecility that has supported every major aberration, whether political or social, that has afflicted the country. Ouch, that's hurts, right? Someone who worships in the true faith at the Bryant-Denny Sabin Temple in the holy city of Tuscaloosa. Then I said unto them, what is the high place whereunto you go? And the name whereof is called Bama until this day. I mean, we can't help it if the Crimson Tide is biblically inspired. An interesting thing is Alabama was I'm just going to go over some things here real quickly in the 19th century. Alabama was opposed to nullification. That surprises some people sometimes. So that was one of John C. Calhoun's big things. And James G. Birney was a very interesting man. I don't know if you know Topper Birney, who used to be on the Huntsville. Topper is his great-great-grandson. And he came here and on the frontier in the 18 teens and was a wealthy young man. And a lot of young people went out, you know, in an emerging community like North Alabama to start their fortunes. He bought a plantation out in Triana. And was alternate delegate to the Constitutional Convention in 1819, was on the first board of directors of the University of Alabama, mayor of Huntsville in 1829. He was a slaveholder, but he had a religious epiphany and became a leading abolitionist, founded one of the major abolitionist societies. And like so many after the Nat Turner Rebellion in 1831, left the South. And was in Michigan and Ohio and so forth. And he started the Liberty Party, which was the first abolitionist political party in the United States. And he was their nominee for president in 1840 and 1844. And in 1844, he played the spoiler in the presidential election because he pulled just enough votes in the state of New York to flip New York's electoral votes in favor of Pope over Henry Clay. And so it's a very interesting story. And two of his sons were generals in the Union Army, this sort of thing. We also had I'm not going to go into this story. It's a little bit too complicated. We've had one vice president, and it was William Rufus King, who was a senator, and he ran with Franklin Pierce in 1852 and was elected. He never really served because he was in Cuba recovering from tuberculosis and was actually inaugurated in Cuba as vice president. And so he came back, but he died soon thereafter. He is also believed to be the first LGBTQ, I forget all the letters, high public official. And King County, Washington was named for him, where Seattle is. And they changed the name to Martin Luther King County a number of years ago, and local gay activists were upset about that. So, and of course, that's that old Civil War problem that continues to haunt us, right? I tell my students we live in the shadow of these events, although there's no one living. We also had a congressman from North Alabama who was a member of the Greenback Labor Party in the 1870s. We also had an African-American congressman that I'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation named Thomas Rapier from actually the Florence area. Joe Wheeler, you've all heard of him. And But I'm going to talk about primarily these things here today. The Democratic dominance in Alabama politics from 1901 to the 60s. Big Jim Folsom and the triumph of the progressives. George Wallace, Old South versus New South. Civil rights alters Alabama politics, and the reemergence of the Republican Party. Democratic dominance, boy, there are statespeople there that you'll be proud of, and there are some that you're, oh, God almighty. The 1901 Alabama Constitution, I don't have to tell you the controversy of it, the longest in the nation, and God, it's punishment for children to make them read it or even parts of it. There's much misinformation about this document, but it's very difficult to get rid of it for some complicated reasons. First, it was to stop the populist movement and progressive movements at the time that were very powerful in many parts of the country, including here in Alabama. In 1892, do you know that the Populist Party candidate for president, James Weaver, running against Benjamin Harrison, the incumbent president, and the former president, Grover Cleveland, who was ultimately elected, Madison County voted for the Populist Party candidate for president. Established white supremacy to thwart the growing African-American vote, to stop Republicans, many of whom were African-Americans, and to entrench the big mule interest. Big mules is a term that Big Jim Folsom liked to use about this. Booker T. Washington was a major player in Alabama politics. Of course, President of Tuskegee, and a leading Republican, probably the most prominent Republican who was not actually elected to an office, but he was actually the patronage person in Alabama during 3 presidential administrations, McKinley and Teddy Roosevelt and William Howard Taft. Had to go to him to get anything done with the federal government. And so there were a lot of backroom meetings. And this is a letter from, I'm not sure what this one, I was thinking that was the Teddy Roosevelt letter saying he would get with him on appointments. But, you know, I know that, you know, race issues are very difficult to talk about, but we have to talk about them. And the fact, this thing about white supremacy, we hear a lot about. Well, it was on our ballot for over 60 years. The Democratic ballot had at the top white supremacy for the right. It did not change until 1964. So they constant, and here it is. You see it there. The Republican symbol at the time was the Vulcan, of course. But we did have some people actually to be proud of, at least on some issues. One was the aforementioned Oscar W. Underwood. And Underwood, you see, in the 1920s, the Ku Klux Klan made a second emergence in the culture and died out because of scandal and a number of other things. The modern reincarnation of the Klan came in the 50s with the civil rights movement and so forth, in opposition to that. In New York City, the Democratic National Convention, and at the time you had to have a 2/3 vote to win the nomination. And he was a contender. He was running for president. He had run in 12, but he ran again for the Democratic nomination. Probably at least half of the delegates were Klansmen or Klan sympathizers at that convention. It's well known, well documented. And they had become a force. And it wasn't just in the South. The largest per capita Klan membership was in California, interestingly enough. They were very powerful in the Midwest. They had Klan parades and so forth in New Jersey. And of course, you know, a little bit of controversial thing. I'm not casting aspersions here, please know that. But Fred Trump was arrested at a Klan rally. He says he just happened to be there, which, you know, is plausible. And anyway, this man, the senator from Alabama, took a stand against the Klan at the Democratic National Convention, which would sound odd for a Southern politician. He failed by 1 vote to get a plank in the Democratic platform condemning the Klan as an un-American organization. And in the end, this thing went 104 ballots. Never happened before. They came to him in a backroom deal and said if he would give up the opposition to the Klan, he could be the nominee of the party. And he said no. He's one of the people mentioned in John F. Kennedy's Profiles in Courage, which is a short biographies of people who risked their political careers to do what was right. Cotton Tom Heflin. You're not going to be too proud of Cotton Tom. Don't confuse him with Senator Howell Heflin, and we all remember Senator Howell Heflin, although I think it was his uncle. But Cotton Tom is a perfect example of a U.S. Senate seat is a terrible thing to waste. He had two issues. He hated Catholics, and he was a proud, outspoken racist. And his whole campaign of holding office was built on those two issues. He had a black suit and a white suit, I've read, and he wore the white suit in the summer and the black suit in the winter. So it probably smelled a little after a while. But he, one of his, he actually went over and endorsed Al Smith's opponent, Herbert Hoover, in 1928, because Al Smith, the Democratic nominee, was a Catholic from New York. And he claimed in his speeches that if Smith were elected president, the Pope would come up the Alabama River in a submarine and force everybody to convert to Catholicism. There are people who bought this. There's some cartoons at the time about that. And then Hugo Black, I guess you might say to some, he's the redeemed sinner, because he was actually a New Deal senator from Alabama. And he was nominated in 1937 to be on the Supreme Court. Well, I tell my kids all the time, and my young people in class, be careful what you're associated with. It can come back and bite you in the rump. And kind of turned out he'd been a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And this was a front page on the New York Daily News in 1937. An artist had gone in and drawn a Klan outfit on one of the justices. And he fought back. He produced a resignation letter from 1925, where he had resigned from the Klan, and he accepted the responsibility and said, I resigned. I do not agree with them, this type of thing. And he survived. Went on to be what some people consider one of the more liberal justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. Co-wrote the Brown v. Board, for example. And he was really big on First Amendment issues and child labor issues and those types of things. That's a detail of them. And then Bill Graves, another one of those people whose reputation has come into question in recent years, because if you went to any college or university that existed at the time, there's a Bill Graves Hall on that campus. I know there's one in Alabama. There used to be one at Auburn. Alabama A&M recently changed their Bill Graves name. Jacksonville State, UNA, was Bill Graves, because he pumped tons and tons of money into education. And there's two things you never saw on his political literature. One, he was a Rhodes Scholar. And two, he was one of the Grand Cyclops or something of the Ku Klux Klan, which in the past year of reckoning that has been exposed. So, history is changing pretty rapidly these days. Here he is campaigning for office. He actually, when Hugo Black went to the Supreme Court, our first woman U.S. senator, an interim senator, was his wife, Dixie Bibb Graves, who served about 6 months or so. The Bankhead family, a lot of things, Bankhead Parkway, Bankhead National Forest, and so forth. I think there were 4 Bankheads, 1 in the Senate, 3 in the House. 1 was Speaker of the House, our only Speaker of the House. But his daughter is more famous than he is, because she was Tallulah Bankhead, the famous actress, and quite outspoken individual at the time. In 1948, the the National Democratic Convention, this is the Alabama delegation. And by the way, this is the notorious Bull Connor. And they are protesting against the civil rights plank. The Democrats, for the first time in 1948, put in a civil rights plank. Now, the Republican Party, remember, the Republican Party is the party of abolition. They've had a civil rights plank since 1856. But this is the first time the Democrats had put a civil rights plank. And the Alabama delegation walked out, except 2 people. Most of the Southern delegations did. It's a good book there if you want to read about that. One of the 2 delegates who did not walk out was a young George Wallace. And he stayed and supported Truman. That's actually a piece of literature from that election that we have in our collection. Of course, they nominated Strom Thurmond and Fielding Wright as the Dixiecrat ticket. And they took, I think it was 5 southern states, correct me if I'm wrong. They held their convention in Birmingham at the Boutwell Auditorium, and someone hung Truman in effigy there, as you can see. Alabama was very divided, actually, from the loyalist Democrats and so forth, and for many years. Lister Hill, another giant. These men were what Richard Shelby would be in recent years, and we all know how important Richard Shelby is to us. But Lister Hill and John Sparkman, they were giants. They're the reason, really, we have NASA and the Army and so forth here. This is John Sparkman. It's Lister Hill. I don't know who the other man is. And the man on the right, of course, is Hugo Black. And someone said Georgia had Eugene Talmadge, notorious racist. Mississippi had Bilbo. We actually, in comparison, I heard someone say one time, compared to what? But compared to them, they would be considered progressive. This is Sparkman campaigning. This is at the 56th convention. Sparkman was also the Democratic vice presidential nominee with Adlai Stevenson. Often the Democrats chose a north-south type ticket for obvious purposes. And Big Jim Folsom, one of the more colorful people who held public office in Alabama. One of the many people would say progressives. I may not be using progressives, and I'll talk about those labels next week, like maybe we're using it today. But he was elected governor in 46 and had to skip a term, and in 54 ran numerous other times, but was never elected again. But he was very, very colorful. He always had a band with him. The Strawberry Pickers was usually it, and to draw crowds at rallies and so forth. A large man. He would have been a pro basketball player in another era, maybe. Here he is with Sparkman and Hill, just to show you how big he was. He was 6'9", I've been told. Asked little Jim to give us a pair of his old shoes if they have any around for the collection. As a considered very handsome young man at the time, he was a widower, claimed to have kissed at least 50,000 women in the 46 campaign, and one got pregnant. We're not sure how. But just some images of him campaigning. But he also had all these antics that brought ridicule on him, like here he is with his pants unbuckled, and he loved liquor apparently, and drinking a highball or whatever, and has holes in his socks. And these things make the media. And Life magazine actually did a spread on him. And it was, I just go through here and this would get you a sexual harassment lawsuit today, probably. But he bypassed the babies. And that was Big Jim. And he used to take the state plane to fly out to date Governor Earl Warren of California, his daughter. And controversial, and he liked the attention. And this was also a shot in Time magazine. This is pre-Cosmopolitan doing these. But he was the first person elected governor with the support of organized labor. And this is an anti-Folsom thing, a little anti-labor, a little racism built in there as well, of basically talking about the Harlem. They're talking about black folks, of course. We have this in our collections, a big broadside. He also, in 1955, he was governor again. This is during the Montgomery bus boycott. And Adam Clayton Powell, congressman from New York, African-American congressman, was in Montgomery. And he committed a faux pas in the age of segregation. He invited him over to the governor's mansion for a drink, sent the state limousine over to get him. And it got in the press, and they raked him over the coals for it. But he actually was an early advocate of the black vote, wanted to replace the Constitution. He signed the anti-lynching law. He stopped the beating of prisoners and whipping of prisoners in prison. And quite progressive in many ways. There he is signing the anti-masking law against the Klan, and openly sought the African-American vote. What little there was, because most of that vote, of course, was discriminated against. He says here when he's campaigning in 62 that Alabama has got to forget the Civil War and move into the 20th century. This is him in later years meeting President Carter. He was blind by then. George Wallace, Old South versus New South. Complex individual, George Wallace. Was elected governor 4 times. His wife was elected once. In 1954, a man by the name of Albert Patterson was running for Attorney General of Alabama. And he was assassinated by the Phoenix City mob. You know, it was a bad version of Las Vegas at the time down near Columbus, Georgia. And they made his son, John Patterson, the nominee, which at that time to be the Democratic nominee was tantamount to being elected. And so John Patterson ran against Wallace. Wallace was endorsed by the NAACP, 1958. And John Patterson was endorsed by the Klan. Governor Patterson, by the way, still living. His son's a member of our club. And he beat Wallace. And that's supposedly when Wallace said that he would not be out segregated again, but there's different wording, rumor says. There Wallace is campaigning. When I was in the first grade in 1958, they let us out of school to go down to the crossroads there, the one's crossroads. And there was a man on the truck standing there shaking his fist. I was more interested in playing in the dirt. And I didn't realize many years later it was George Wallace. And so that he would have liked this picture. He really appealed to rural Alabamians. One of the people running against him was Bull Connor, the notorious Bull Connor. And this is some of his literature. He checks off all the qualifications: experience, education, segregation, honesty, integrity, I particularly like the middle one there where it has communism shadowing off from integration. And here Wallace is standing in the schoolhouse door. It's probably the issue that made him and destroyed him at the same time. And he ran in the Democratic presidential primaries in 1964. He could not run for re-election in 1966, so he ran Lurleen, and she won, of course, beating 9 opponents in the first primary. And those are very valuable political items, by the way. I collect political items. These are gold out there on the market if you've got one of those stuffed away in a drawer someplace. A couple $100. Of course, they were all over the national press and so forth at the time. Got this in our collection. I got this from the Bill Jones papers. Bill Jones was Wallace's press secretary. It's actually, when Lurleen died, it is a telegram from Coretta King a month after her husband had been assassinated. It's quite powerful. And so I'll read it to you. I think you should. It says, on behalf of my children, we offer our sincerest sympathy and condolences in your bereavement. As a widow, I am actually aware of the awesome burden thrust upon a surviving parent. It is as a Christian mother that I express my family's heartfelt sympathy to you and yours. We shall offer our prayers for God's continued blessings. I want to quote one of my late husband's expressions of hope and faith. Only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. Mrs. Martin Luther King. Never found any documentation. I've talked to people even at the King Center and so forth if there was ever an acknowledgement or whatever. Don't know. Bill says he's deceased now. He just didn't remember. He said he had known that we bought his papers a number of years ago. And he said he had known that he would have pulled it out because I had somebody to contact me a few years ago and offer us $2,000 for that. And I said, well, I can't still sell state property. It was Wallace campaigning in 1968. He ran as a third party ticket. Madison Square Garden, Trenton, New Jersey, Hannibal, Missouri, Maryland, and on. He was, but of course there was also opposition to him. There he is with Jack Benny in Lurleen. His running mate, Curtis LeMay, that's another story. Got to speed up some here. And of course, opponents picketing. He took entertainment with him, Mona and Lisa, and he later married Lisa on the ride in the the Birmingham News published this, I would say, rather unflattering full page. Thank you. I may have to finish up next week if you would let me. In 1970, the governor's race between Albert Brewer. Albert had been a protege. Wallace wanted to run for governor again. Brewer wanted to run for governor's own right. And really ugly. This is a Photoshop thing of Brewer, supposedly with Elijah Muhammad, leader of the Nation of Islam. Watergate in Alabama politics. Nixon actually put $400,000 in the Alabama governor's race, not for good government. He just wanted to prevent Wallace from running again and siphoning off votes. 72, he ran again. And of course, you know, he was assassination attempt. Here, Ted Kennedy is given the Spirit of America Award in Decatur back in 73. There he is with Nixon in Huntsville right before Nixon resigned. And he later went to, in 1979, he went to the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church to ask for forgiveness for the sins of the past. There he is with George Bush and Bill Clinton, George Jr. Life after Alabama politics, Fob James. My favorite story about this photograph is it's in the rotunda of the Capitol. You've been there. Was in a newspaper article, a little boy with his mom there, and he ran over and he looked at that portrait and ran back to his mom and said, "That's the man that killed Big Bird." If I ever write a book, I'm going to call the Fobbs chapter "The Man Who Killed Big Bird." Altering Alabama politics, civil rights. You note, you can't see it very clearly. I've been looking for a clearer photograph of this, but obviously African-American men voting. It says Democrats for the right. They've changed it. Of course, the civil rights movement started, the modern civil rights movement in Montgomery with the bus boycott, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King. He's being arrested here for loitering, pretty rough treatment. This was not the first time. These are some later photographs. Of course, Coretta King is a native Alabamian from Marion. The first big thing was in 57, I believe it was, when Autherine Lucy was expelled after one day of going to classes at Alabama because of riots and so forth. This is a sign that I've got to tell you about. And back in the mid 70s, I got a job one summer as a laborer at the Alabama Highway Department. We picked up dead animals and signs, illegal signs off the road and so forth. And we would take the illegal signs, and this over on Highway 20, and pile them up. There was 2 or 3 piles, high piles out in the back. And they always tried to keep us busy. And that's why we are, was labor. And they had us out there to load those signs on the back of a dump truck to haul them to the dump. And we were fussing about it because it's a perfectly good bulldozer. And these things are old and rusty. They'd been there decades, they look like. It took us several days, but we finally loaded them all up. And at the bottom of one of those piles was this sign. And it says, "Welcome to Alabama, except integrationists and mongrelizers, the KKKFC." I asked my boss, could I say, I believe in preserving history, including the bad and the ugly. And I asked for the sign. And so I put it in my car and took it home. I'm about to give it to the Alabama Department of Archives. Steve Murray's a friend of mine down there. It's oxidized and it's going to disappear, and they have the means to preserve it. Okay, let me see if I can get to the end of this particular section here. The Klan is reemerging. This is Robert Sheldon, who was leader of the Klan at the time. Dr. Martin Luther King came to Huntsville in 1962. Spoke. I'll go into this when we meet again. And this is Birmingham, of course. These pictures, of course, not only in the humanity of it, but it's bad ops. This child here, Sonny Hereford IV, 6 years old, the first child to integrate public schools in Alabama. And I got to know the Hereford family very well because when I started at Butler in 1974, 17-year-old Sonny is one of my kids, and I later taught a couple of his sisters. So the rule goes, as a teacher, if kids like you, mom and daddy's going to like you, and they were very actively involved in the school. So perhaps somewhere down the road, we made a documentary called A Civil Rights Journey about integration in Huntsville and North Alabama that you might be interested in. Of course, they defied the governor. A few days later, after the Birmingham integration happened the following day, was the day of the church bombing, where the 4 children were killed. The 1964 Civil Rights Act came out of this, ending segregation in public establishments. Huntsville and Madison County were 2 years before this, by the way. And the settlement of Montgomery March. Even the Black Panther movement has some roots in Alabama, down in Lowndes County. It was the first place the Panther was used for the Black Panther movement. There's a group called the Republic of New Africa, which is very interesting to read about this. I'll let you look all that up. But it affects, I've heard people say, it doesn't matter what other people think. I was driving here this morning and there's one of those little stickers, warmed my heart, on the back of somebody's SUV, and had the state of Alabama right in the middle of it, said 18. Of course, we know what that means. Should have been 19, because Alabama was the only undefeated, untied team in the country. Politics entered. There's been a lot written on this. A lot written on it. Dr. John Cashin, I had his kids as well. John's a dear friend. He created the National Democratic Party of Alabama, a rival Democratic Party. And these are some of, they challenged the delegation in 68 and 72 to the Democratic National Convention, almost pulled it off. And Dr. Joe Reed and Mayor Arrington, who played major roles in state politics. And I may just leave it at that. And if it's okay, I'll finish up next week, because I get to telling stories about all this and so forth. But I thank you very much, and see you next week.
Thank you, Dr. Burke. Okay, so we're lucky to have part 2 of that. What a great way to start Thursday morning, learning about Alabama politics. Some of those great images, or not so great images, we're seeing up there. So we're looking forward to part 2 next week. Is there anything before we close with the 4-way test? Anything else? If not, please stand for the 4-way test. Of the things we think, say, or do, first, is it true? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will build goodwill and better friendships. And fourth, will be beneficial to all concerned. Okay, see y'all next week. Thank you.